This is the Construction Leading Edge podcast from constructionleadingedge.com and buildermasterclass.com. My name is Todd DeWalt, and it's my job to help you, the construction business owner and leader, eliminate chaos and maximize profits on your projects. Got an interview today for you with David Procida. He is a longtime contractor. He has started multiple businesses, sold a few businesses, made some mistakes, and he's got some interesting insights to share with us today. Here's what you're going to hear and what you're going to learn about in this podcast. You're going to hear about David's biggest mistake that he made when he owned a construction business. You'll hear about how money is a scorecard, and more generally, how David thinks about money. David talks about how action cures fear. He's also going to share his advice for you. If you're early on in your career or in the middle of your career, it's frankly just some great advice on how to get better. David will also talk about the single biggest mistake to avoid when selling a construction business. He'll talk about his favorite failure in business that ended up setting him up for success, how being leveraged in business is like walking a tightrope, and then how the purchase price for a construction business is determined. He also talks about how buyers will look at your business, and it's very different than the way you look at your business. And then I asked David his advice for someone who wants to start a construction business. Lots of good stuff here. It's going to be a great interview. You're going to get a lot out of this, so you may want to take notes. Before we get into that interview, here are a couple of resources that I want to make sure and get in front of you first. I don't want my competition to know about CoConstruct because it gives me an edge over them. That's what one custom home builder told me after using CoConstruct for a couple of years. I referred one of my coaching clients who's a custom home builder to CoConstruct, and after using it for a couple of weeks, he said, the ability to schedule projects weeks in advance has been an absolute game changer. And there's all sorts of other things that CoConstruct does for you. It basically lets you run your entire business on one piece of software. Using CoConstruct means you'll be able to manage your projects with more profits, less chaos, and maybe even with less people. And there are two unexpected benefits to being a CoConstruct user. Number one, it gives you access and membership into a community of other builders where you can share best practices, bounce ideas off each other. And then number two, CoConstruct is not just a software company. They don't want to just sell you software. They will help you become a better builder and better at business. As one builder told me, quote, CoConstruct cares about my bottom line, not just theirs, end quote. So if you're a home builder, remodeler, general contractor, and you want to up your game, reduce chaos, increase profits, then go to constructionleadingedge.com/CoConstruct. See what CoConstruct can do for you. If you sign up, make sure and tell them that I sent you, and then I'm going to load you up with some bonuses, some templates that will help you get up the learning curve even faster. But go to constructionleadingedge.com/CoConstruct and see what it can do for you. If you're a busy construction business owner, there's a pretty good chance that you don't have good visibility into your financials. You could be getting financial reports too late, or maybe not getting financial reports at all. Or maybe you're not keeping your books up and you really don't have any idea what your numbers are. Well, if that's you, you're not alone. Scott Schweiger said this: I highly recommend Apparatus Contractor Services. My small startup construction company was over a year behind with its bookkeeping. I was wearing way too many hats, and ultimately the books suffered. They provided bookkeeping solutions that got us caught up in the systems to stay on the right track. I'm so happy I'm turning over payroll processing to them as well. Elizabeth Evans said hiring Apparatus was a game changer for our business. They've allowed me to grow our construction company over 100% since we hired them about a year ago. Bill, president of Spice Industries, said hiring Apparatus was one of the best business decisions I've ever made. They have almost completely freed me up from sitting at my computer reconciling budgets with my own makeshift system. So if you want to offload your bookkeeping or payroll headaches, or you just want better reporting, the Apparatus Contractor Services team may be able to help you. Visit goapparatus.com to hear from other construction business owners and see how Apparatus can help you. That's goapparatus.com. All right, here we go. Let's jump into my interview with David Procida. Enjoy. All right, I'm here with David Procida. David, thanks for reaching out. Thanks for being on the podcast. How's it going today for you?
It's going well, man. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate you reaching out on LinkedIn. And so let's just jump into it. We're going to talk about a lot of things. I think we're going to unravel some mysteries about buying and selling businesses before we're done. But let's talk about your career. What you've had a pretty extensive career, but just tell us about some of the highlights and things that have led you to where you're at today. Maybe start with what you're doing today, and then what are some of the things that you did prior to that?
Sure. I'm the president and owner of Adacorp Construction, LLC. It's a consulting firm, and I do a few things. Basically, I consult with commercial construction businesses, subcontractors mostly right now. I'm involved with a company called CJ Coakley, and I've been for over a year. They're a big client. Used to be a client when I was a subcontractor, but beyond consulting about mostly business development, how to grow their business, utilize adjacent construction, how to leverage their sales and things like that. And this company's been in business for 58 years, but we all need to evolve. So I'm helping them do that, and it's been so far a smashing success. I'm happy about that. I like to work with them. But beyond that, I also get involved in acquisition and sales, mostly representing the sellers of commercial construction businesses to large national roll-up companies. And that has been really, really exciting. I've been through it myself, but that's kind of where I am today. So I kind of wear two hats as a consultant. But, deep down, Todd, I'm a contractor. There's no doubt about it. I've been doing that for just shy of 40 years. So when you listen to me, you might hear a lot of stuff about buying and selling. I've done all of it. I've been fortunate, but I'm a contractor at heart.
So tell us about the business or one of the businesses that you ran and ultimately sold.
So I started out, I was college basketball player, D3. I had a nice couple of years there. I just wanted to coach and teach health and phys ed. So went to Glassboro State College, which is now Rowan University, because one of the alumni who lived in New Jersey had an overseas company, I don't know, maybe in the mid 90s, donated $100 million to Glassboro State College. So went from a teacher school to an engineering school. Anyway, I got out of college in 77, and I got a job as a teacher. I coached at my college for a year as a graduate assistant. And then the next year I coached a JV school or a JV team at a school that was where I was a sister school to where I went to high school. So life is easy, right? Superintendent tells me, Dave, you're going to be the next phys ed teacher here at the high school, and you're going to be the head basketball coach. I had the current head basketball coach sitting next to me. And we had a great season. Bottom line is it didn't happen. Didn't get the job. And at the same time, in my third year in teaching, Todd, I was informed by a bank that I was rejected for a loan for a mortgage for $32,000. So that kind of shook me. And I said, you know what, you might want to rethink what you're doing. Long story short, the next year I'm teaching racquetball, making extra money. And I meet a guy named Frank who owns a commercial insulation, or actually a residential insulation business. He asked me if I wanted a summer job. I said, sure. Things worked out. I liked it. I could sell. I was natural at it. And he offered me a full-time job. So I left teaching. Now, I hated to do that, but I almost had to because I couldn't make any money teaching. So I went to work as a salesman. I didn't know insulation from plywood, but I knew how to sell and I learned it. Fast forward 2 years with him, I figured I could do it myself. So I got backers and got involved in business in like 1983. And that seems like an eon ago, but not a whole lot of stuff has changed. Technology certainly has, but relationships hasn't. And I think that's something that may be a little bit lost today, that I try and impose on people that I consult with. Get with people, relationships. So I started my business with backers, and this really dovetails into some of the mistakes that I made. Now, I tell people in my own podcast, if you want to start a business, the worst thing you can do is grab people for money. Now, these guys, they gave me more than money because they were in the construction business. They were clients. So they taught me the business. They loaned me $50,000, and 2.5 years later, I did a leverage buyout with National Westminster Bank, and I gave them their 50 back and another 1.75 million. Now, the good news is I could do it, and maybe without them, I wouldn't have. But I talk about how to start a business and the considerations that you should realize. And one is, why are you doing it? Because the why you start a business has to be a lot stronger than the crap you're going to deal with getting through the business. And I've done it, man. I've been through the worst. But we talk about things like engaging the right professionals, getting the right information. I was a physical education teacher. I had a certain amount of, personal experience with people and an emotional IQ. So I could read people, but I didn't know business. And I probably could have done, I know I could have done a lot better with two things. One is when you start a deal with somebody, you have to get as much as you can because you're going to have to buy. If you end up buying them out, it's going to cost you less if you do that. And many other things about starting a business that are critical. So, if you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking about starting a business or you're thinking about joining somebody in a new business, right? In one of my episodes, we talk about all the do's and don'ts, all the mistakes I made. Now, I could beat myself up. Oh, you should have never done that. Well, if I didn't hook up with these guys, I had $0 to my name, but I had goodwill and they knew they could, they basically banked on me and they won. So every situation is different, but there's several things to consider when you're starting a business. Now I have my own business. I got a lot of debt service. I have one company. We did insulation contracting in the mid-Atlantic market from New York City to Philadelphia. And at first it was pretty easy because I was the only guy that was doing it. Business was great in the 80s. I leveraged that and I started up 5 other companies. So when I say started them up, I knew the industry, but I didn't know how to erect curtain wall. But I knew a guy that did. Didn't know how to erect panels, exterior prefabricated composite panels, but I know a guy who did. So I did that like 5 times under one umbrella. And it was awesome. Did $25 million in 1991. And I'm like, 8 years out of teaching school. And I'm a guy in New York doing this kind of business. But then the business slowed down. And I learned something very valuable. And it cost me a lot of money. That if you're leveraged, which I was, you're walking a tightrope. And as long as the economy continues to grow and you're leveraged, it's okay. But once the proverbial stuff hits the fan, you've got to have a reserve. And I didn't. I just banked everything on the future. So, trying to get through this quickly, in 92, I almost lost pretty much everything. I tell the story that, I had a Mercedes 560 SEC. I went to a 10-year-old SUV. I had 3 houses. 3 houses I owned. I went to 1 rented house. And the crazy part is, people would say, that had to be disastrous. Well, it was only disastrous for a little while because once you realize you have an issue and you have people like my wife and my kids behind me, you just start over. And as soon as you get rolling again, it feels good. And that really, money is important, but it's almost like a scorecard, So I got into business and built it back in the 90s, sold it to a public company in 2000. Now, this was great because I was part of a roll-up, had a partner, but they were more interested in buying him, who was a supplier, than me, a contractor. But we were together and we came together. So I got a call on June 30th, 2000 from my banker, said, "Hey, Dave, the money hit." It was unbelievable. So from there, I worked for a public company, part of their acquisitions team between 2000 and 2007. Then I decided that was enough for me. I wanted to get back into business. And met a friend who was a former client, big drywall company, component assembly system, family-owned business. They're fantastic, based out of New York. And the cool part was, Art Dorner, the president, says, "Dave," he goes, "come to work for us." And I'm like, man, how do you tell somebody you really don't want to go to work for them, but you want to do their business? That's a fine line. Anyway, 2 months later, he insisted on me coming up there and saying, "Look, let's just either we'll do it or not do it." So we did it. So I became their business development manager nationally. And for 7 years, even during a downturn, it was a great run. Left them and went to a public company called Top Build True Team as their commercial guy. And I don't want to get into details. If you listen to my profile on my podcast, you'll hear all the details behind this. But in an effort to save some time, I worked for them in a job that was perfectly suited for me. Perfectly suited. It was teaching, coaching, and being a contractor all wrapped up into one. Trying to leverage multiple divisions across the country to do better at what they do. Which is kind of what I do now as a consultant. But that ended quite abruptly in 2018. But where one door closes, another door opens. Now you think about me, I'm a little older than you. So for me to be looking for, being forced a career change on me, that might be a really big negative to some people. And I can understand why. But to me, it was an opportunity to do some things that I really want to do. And that's kind of where I am now at Corp, which kind of brought me to you.
Yeah, lots to unpack there. And we're going to talk about where people can go to listen to your podcast, which I highly recommend before we're done here. How you mentioned money, how you think about money. I think how this is something people don't think about. They don't think about how they think about money. I interviewed a young man who's probably early 30s, started his business just recently. And I asked him a question, what's one thing that he believes about business that some people would say is a little unconventional? And he said, money isn't real. And he talked about that, which was an interesting way to think about it. So you mentioned money as a scorecard. How do you think about money? You've been making money, handling money for quite a while now. How do you think about money in a way that might surprise people? So
3 basic things about money. And I'd rather have it than not have it. I'd rather have more of it than less of it. And I'd rather have it now than later. But that's not what motivates me. See, money to me is a tool and it buys time. So the combination of time and money is the most important thing to me. And I think, I said earlier, people have to know why they're getting in business, why they're willing to sacrifice and risk every day what they do. And for me, it was being in control of my time, having enough money to have a good lifestyle, but being in control of my time. What I'm not is a workaholic. I can tell you this, Todd, if I look back on my life, I look back on things like my family, my sports endeavors, my coaching. Like I coached a ton. And if all I was concerned about was making money, I'd still be at the office. But I wasn't. I coached kids. I coached all my kids. I coached in high school. I coached in club. I was the president of a 6,000 kid club. Huge. We built a field complex. That took my attention for the better part of 3 years after I sold my business initially. But I say that because, and it's not the right or wrong path. It's the path I chose. It's a combination of the money allows me to control my lifestyle. And that's about as much as I can say.
I like it. Let's talk about mindset. When you've had the opportunity to work with lots of successful people, lots of, I assume, unsuccessful people, probably some dysfunctional people, what do you find are some of the most common mindsets or the way people think, the most common ways successful people think? Are there any trends that you see? For example, people who are people pleasers typically get in trouble, or people who are workaholics typically get in trouble. Are there trends that you've seen among successful people when it comes to their mindset?
Yeah, I think most successful people, and I used this term earlier, have a high emotional IQ. Okay, so you combine the ability to see the room from above, to see people and understand what they need and what they want. That's the first thing, right? If you have a driving desire to do something else, that's important. It's like gasoline in a car, man, it'll go. But I think to be successful, you have to know who you are, you have to know what you want, and you have to live by that. So I see managers, for example, who aren't good with people, but because they either inherited the business or whatever, they're managing people and they sit in their office and they read spreadsheets and reports and everything else. But what they're not paying attention to are the people that work for them, right? So you have to be, I think you have to, the good, successful people set good, successful examples. They're positive, right? They're sober, but they're optimistic. And that's important, right? You can't be always thinking about it. You got to be thinking about the tough stuff too. They know how to empower and inspire others. And look, it's like coaching. What's a good coach? A good coach understand, like you develop and you agree with your team. Where do we want to go? And then as a good coach, you plot the course. You develop people in the process. You put people in a position where they can succeed. And ultimately, you get the most out of everybody, including yourself. So trends, I've been, you use the word dysfunctional. And believe me, I've seen it. And that's just, it's hard to describe and it can be frustrating, right? But you got to work with the cards that you have. So I've owned my own business and dealt with clients. I've worked for other people and dealt with bosses. But the thing that holds true is that you got to know what you want. You got to know what they want, set a good example, and, provide that positive energy.
Emotional intelligence for people who are like, I realize I suck at emotional intelligence. I'm good at scope, schedule, budget, safety, but when it comes to the people part, I'm just completely lost. What's one piece of advice you would give to people who want to get better at their emotional intelligence?
So action cures fear. Action cures fear. Most people, when they state it, that's a problem because then they believe it, right? But what you can do, I have someone I work with right now, and that person is awesome. They're highly skilled, very, very intelligent, but they're not so sure that they're good with people. And I cannot understand why, because they haven't done it. So as a manager, I can provide small steps, okay? For example, negotiating with manufacturers or suppliers. Now, that's a good first step for somebody who doesn't think they're good in business, because the guy on the other side wants to make you happy. The last thing he's going to do is argue with you. So that was a good first step. But I would say, look, there are people in the world, Todd, that are like that, and thank goodness, because I need people like that. You need people like that, right? There's a place for everybody. But if people want to change, that's the first thing. If they want to get better, and you ask, what do I do? That would be one thing. But expose them in a way that's not going to hurt, and acknowledge when they do a good job, and say, you know what? And just be real with them. Because if you're real and you can close the door and say, look, John, you could have done a lot better, and here's how, A, B, and C. If you can do that, they'll trust you. Because if you just constantly shower them with, hey man, great job, it's not going to sound like anything anymore. So be honest with them, be a mentor, but you got to know what they want, not what you want. If they want to get better, here's how we can help you.
Yeah, and I would say to people who are listening to this thinking, well, you know what? I'm not good at sales, or I'm not good at networking, or I'm just this, or I'm just this. Anything that's I'm an introvert, or I just have a bad temper, those are just excuses that you're hiding behind, and you can change those things. But if you're waiting for something mystical and magical to change so that fear goes away, you're going to spend the rest of your life waiting. So I completely agree. Action cures fear. So take small steps. Confidence comes from action. So a lot of people are waiting for confidence to come before they take action. And I'm here to tell you the only way to get confidence is to take some risks, take some measured risks, take some action, move in that direction, and stop hiding behind the I'm just, or I'm, which I read an interesting book that talked about this neurotic cycle that starts with I'm shy. So I go to a networking event and I think about going over to talk to somebody, but then I realize, oh, I'm shy. I'm not good with people. So then what happens?
Right.
That cycle continues and you don't go talk to people because you're shy. And it's a bunch of crap, quite frankly, and you're hiding. There's some fear of rejection, fear of criticism, fear of failure. And personally, I like to go straight at that stuff. I find that's where things get really interesting and fun, when you go straight at that resistance and fear.
Well, before you go on to the next, I want to add one thing there. Is that when I was a teacher, I wasn't making any money, and someone came up to me, a guy that I had a lot of respect for, and said, "Dave, come over to my house, and we're going to talk about business." Now, if you ever heard of the Amway business was, back in the day, it was something that you didn't say because it had negative connotations. And he did it right. He said, "Come on over." So I went over, and the very end of the presentation, I liked the guy presenting. He was cool. He was good. And then he said Amway. Now, Amway didn't mean anything because I never heard of it, but I understand why it had that like negative connotation. But I joined. Okay? And you talk about overcoming fear. Imagine this: I invite you and 8 other people, or you're my guy. So we talk about how to invite people to your house so we can engage them in this business. And at the time, it was direct sales, multi-level marketing, and still there, and a great company. But you can't tell them, Todd, what it's about. So you practice that, Hey, Todd, it's Dave, listen, you got a quick minute because I got to run. Yeah, you answer, yeah. What are you doing Wednesday night? Nothing. Great. Come on over. I got a friend I want you to, and you already said you only have a minute. So if he starts peppering you about what you're doing, right? Long story short, I was the guy who ended up going into the living room, facing 10, 12, 15 people that thought I was going to steal their money, and overcoming objections and presenting a case, right? And being calm about it and listening and all that. I'll tell you what, and being trained, that changed me. Now, I'd say that's why I got in the construction business, but that 2-year period, I got through an intense amount of insecurity, because I did, right? I took action.
That reminds me, a very different situation, but I interviewed a lady who owns a business in Cincinnati, Ohio. Her name's Kelly Hollitz, and she was in beauty pageants when she was younger. And she said, if you want to develop confidence, then go get up on stage in front of a bunch of people in a bathing suit and parade around. And she said that fear, or facing that fear of criticism and that fear of rejection, that everything inside her was saying, don't go up there. That's what made her strong. And she got comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think that's a good life lesson right there, is go at the things that make you uncomfortable. And some people listening need to go do some stuff that makes them uncomfortable. You need to go try to sell Amway just for the sake of developing that muscle of doing things that make you uncomfortable and bumping up against that fear. Now, that's great stuff.
Agreed.
So I found that most people have a favorite failure. There's some apparent failure, or what looked like a failure or felt like a failure at the time, that set them up for success. So for me, it was 2002. Well, I started a business in 2002, had to shut it down in 2005 because of this perfect storm of mistakes plus foolishness and several other factors. And at the time, it seemed like just a terrible, shameful failure. But if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't be where I am today. So I'm curious, what is a favorite failure of yours that maybe set you up for success later?
Yeah, that's an easy one. And it happened in 1992. And as I said, I came out of teaching, got into a sales job, and got into business, and everything was growing. And remember, I started out with nothing. My wife loaned me or gave me $5,000 that my partners wanted me, skin in the game. So I had nothing. But I grew a business, bought them out, and then I was leveraged. I had a $1.8 million line with the bank. We were doing 25 million. I had a big net worth. I mean, like I said, I was living large and doing business in New York. And I'm thinking this is easy because I hadn't gotten scarred yet. Hadn't seen a downturn yet. Then all of a sudden in 1992, where I've got all this work going on, the bank comes in, the National Westminster Bank. They came in and said, Dave, Mr. Procida, we're not going to renew your line. What do you mean you're not going to renew it? So they were concerned that they weren't going to cut me off because I would have sued them. So they said, we're not going to renew it. We don't have to renew. We're not going to renew it. So I had 2 months to find additional financing. Now, I went to a guy named Wes Wyatt, and I sat down with Wes. He was a client and a friend. I said, Wes, I'm struggling. He goes, how bad? I said, bad. He goes, what do you need? I said, 200. He goes, 200? He goes, okay. He gets on it, dials an extension, gets on his phone and says to his controller, hey, write David check. Dave, do you want it to you or the company? I said, no, to the company. Write David check for 200,000. Guy brings it in 5 minutes later, right? Then I negotiated with a supplier who later became my business partner for terms. Because what I had to do, Todd, to get out of it, right? I had to start a new company. I had 6 businesses on one side. They were cross-collateralized, one bad apple, and it affected the whole. So I couldn't get financing for that group. So I had to go start another business. Again, starting business, right? It's crazy. But people said at first, what, are you running from your creditors? I said, no, I'm doing the exact opposite. I said, I am starting a new business so I can pay you and everybody else. So what I did was I started a new company and finished the jobs that had the good receivables on it, wound down the jobs that had bad receivables, lost my entire net worth, and it was a lot, in a period of like 9 months. So that was an expensive education. And you look at it as a failure. You mentioned the word failure. And I say, I guess you could describe it as a failure, but it was a temporary setback because I was already, like, during this nastiness, I was already rebuilding the business, shedding the bad companies, paying off. I paid everybody, almost $1 million that I didn't need to pay. I could have bankrupted companies. And as I say in my profile on my podcast, I'm not looking for a pat on the back. I did what I thought was right. And I would do it again. But they all got paid. The bank thought I was going to pay them, like their auditor said, out of $1.8 million, and you're going to pay, he'll be able to pay you $325,000. I said, you got to be kidding me. So I made a deal with them. It was a good deal for me. And I got them all their money back. But it took me like 3 years. But in the process, so that leverage thing, when you're leveraged, I said earlier, you're walking on a tightrope. If you owe a lot of money and you're borrowing against your receivables, those receivables better be grown because you need to fund the business. And once those receivables start shrinking, 2 things happen. One is you got no cash flow, and that hurts. 2 is you'll find out just how important you are to the people who you thought you were important to. Because I had, let's say I had 6 partners, 3 of them just left me with left me dealing with all the crap. 3 of them stayed, and to this day, they're some of my best friends. But that was, I had to kind of go through that to get to the second phase. And I got to tell you, developing and building a business the second time around is so much easier because you've already been through it. You know how to do it. You know what can hang you up. You know what your customers want. And so, that's why we built it back quickly, sold it again in 2000. But that's easily the most memorable mistake, if you can call it that.
Yeah. So let's talk about selling a business. What are some of the biggest mistakes that people make when they get to the table or let's imagine a situation where somebody is a contractor selling their business and they're leading up to the process where they're trying to go through an acquisition of some sort, and they made some big mistake, some common mistake. What are some of the most common mistakes that people realize too late when they're selling their business?
I think the biggest thing is your representation, because as a business owner, you know how to build a business, but you never sold one. So why would you think that you have the tools necessary to sell it? And then not just how much you sell it for, but how much of that you get to keep? Because Uncle Sam is looming, right? That's probably the biggest mistake. Now, in selling a business, there's a couple ways to do it. One is you can sell it internally. And most companies do this because buyers, national buyers or whatever, who are going to buy you out, they're not as prevalent as you might think. But people in your business, right, could be family, it could be managers. Internal sales are very popular. And here we go again. I would strongly recommend. I mean, I interviewed a company, Beacon Exit Planners, and you'll see them. They're number one Amazon bestseller list for a book called The Contractor's 60-Minute Exit Plan. It's a simple read, but if you're looking to potentially sell your business, you have to look at all your options, right? You can go to private equity, but private equity is going to want you to stay, to give you less down, and they're going to give you more of an earnout. Selling internally is probably the simplest way. You sell stock and not assets. So when you sell stock, you get the best capital gains situation for taxes, so you'll be able to keep more. But you're selling it to people who know how to run the business. The problem there, or the challenge, I should say, there is that everything is dependent on the health of the business. If the business goes south, so does everything that you're owed. So there are risks to that too. It's a little simpler, but there's a lot of nuances. Like, I heard a speaker say once, look, just gross up the salary of the seller, like the owner. Gross the salary up and pay him out that way. That's the worst thing you can do. And this was a national consulting firm that said this. So there are people like me and like Kevin and Joe from Beacon who are experts in carving that out. Seek out the right people, because whatever you pay them, it'll be well worth it, right? They should bring you more than they cost by a lot. Now, the other way is get a national company who does what you do. Think about it. Company that's roofing, for example. If you get a big national roofing company and they are looking for local companies to buy, they understand your business. They're more likely to give you a better deal. When I say a better deal, one that gives you more and almost all of your money in one shot. They want you on maybe for 2 years, but they'll give you 90%. There'll be a retainage for bad debt and things like that. But they understand your business. But what they do is they'll ask you a question. They'll say, well, how much single ply roofing or whatever? I'm not a roofer, but how much roofing do you buy? Who do you buy it from? There'll be a list. So you give it to them. And then what they'll do is they'll say, what are you buying at? And this is what we buy at. So right off the bat, if nothing else changed, they're making money because of the difference in what they buy and what you buy. So if they buy 30% better than you and you buy $2 million a year, that's $600,000 that they're going to realize on the bottom line just because they buy more and they buy better. But that's one of the advantages of selling to a national company that's in your space. So in my space, it was insulation and fire stopping and fireproofing and all that. And there are companies out there now, and I'm connected with them. I know the buyers. That's part of the biggest single thing is, how do you find somebody that's interested in you, that understands your business? And so I say, look, how many lines of business are you in? Let's match them up with the right guy. And then those guys will come in, and these are public companies. They have the cash. And think about it, right? They're doing quarterly reports and to Wall Street, and they're looking at that. They're looking at organic growth and growth by acquisition. And everybody loves the top line. My friend Larry, who's my accountant partner, if you will, we laugh about it because a lot of public companies are more interested in the top line and the bottom line. That's not the contractor's perspective.
Right.
But when they can take that and show Wall Street that we just bought a $30 million company, right? And we paid 5 times earnings, but we're selling at 15. I mean, right off the bat, they're in a better position than they were before. So there are a ton of considerations, but get the right representation because that will eliminate a lot of the questions. They'll be able to negotiate better with the buyers. They'll be able to better lead you on the right path.
Yeah, great advice. That's a lead domino that solves a lot of problems. Get the right person on your side. Let's talk about how a business is valued. How does how does a buyer come up with the price of a business?
So it depends on who's buying it. And I always say that the value of your business is what the buyer wants to pay. Just like art, it's in the eyes of the buyer. But if you're selling internally, you're probably not going to get the great multiple that you want. But it's a kind of a soft sale, and it's something that it's almost like a legacy thing, because you're leaving your business to somebody and you've groomed. But the value of that business, let's take a business that does 10 million a year. In general, 10 million a year, and you have a pre-tax profit, that's after overhead, of 1.5 million, 15%. So these companies deal in what's called Ebitda, which is earnings before income taxes, amortization, and depreciation, or depreciation amortization. And that will add back a couple $100,000. So now your trailing 12 months, or your last year, right, is at 1.8 million in terms of earnings. So then there's another thing called non-recurring expenses. So non-recurring expenses are things like, if you're taking, I hate to say it this way, owners of businesses know what, it could be XX cars and vacation, whatever it is, things that are not going to occur again once you're sold. So that's meaningful. Why? If it's 200,000, you add it to your 1.8. So now you're valued at 2 million. So here's the big question, is the multiple, because companies are bought on multiples of Ebitda plus non-recurring. So now you're at 2 million. And it's in construction, it can be anywhere, believe me, from 3 to like 8 times your earnings. So what that means is, let's say if you're $2 million, let's use 5. So now you're $10 million company revenue, and you've got $10 million at a 5 times multiple of your trailing 12 months, your last 12 months earnings. Anyway, you have equity in the business, dealing with a company now that has several $1 million in equity. And I told him, I said, look, you're going to want about 10% of your equity to stay in as cash. So what it means to a $10 million company, if a company has a $2 million equity position on the balance sheet, they're going to keep $1 million of that. So now you have an excess $1 million. So you add that to the 10, you come up with 11. That's what you're going to get from an external buyer. And that's that's a quick way to do it, but that's how they would value your business. Now, there's a couple of things they're going to look for. Well, by the way, last thing that's big. A national company external sale typically will give you 90% on the day of closing. Pretty cool. You get 90% of your money. The last 10 is based on changes in your work in process, your projections from when they closed to when, like a 6-month period later. And what I do for my clients, I say, look, if you want that, then I want it the other way. So if the WIP work in process goes down for the jobs that were part of this sale, then we'll take less money. If it goes up, we want more, So you get all your money right away. You don't get that with a private equity firm. You won't get that with an internal sale, but they're all different. That's a pretty good way to get the multiple. Now, what affects the multiple? A couple things. Your lines of business. If you align really well with the company, if you're doing 5 different things and they're doing 7, but 5 of them are the same, they're going to love you. If you're in a good market that you can grow in, yes. If you're open shop versus union, they're going to look at that, because union companies that hire union employees, the union market is shrinking. That doesn't mean you can't sell your business if you're a union company. I did, but that was in 2000. But I swore, Todd, I'd never see a non-union company in downtown Manhattan in my lifetime. Well, guess what? When the downturn hit, everything changed. So now there's non-union, open shop, we'll call them, all over the place. So your union, non-union, if you're a small guy in a big market, you're probably going to get a bigger multiple. I was involved with a sale once when I was part of the acquisitions team that bought a guy, drywall company, which was not even in their line of business, number one. And he was the biggest guy in a small market. And I'm like shaking my head. I said, why are you doing this? I said, what we offer as a big public company are resources that will enable a small guy to grow. bonding, financing, right? All that stuff. This guy was already maxed out. Now, I don't know how it works since then, but so those are some of the things. And you know what the biggest thing is for you owners out there? Just like when you hire somebody, you look at their history, their skill set, but you know what you're looking at? You're looking at them. You're saying, you might not ask this consciously, but you're wondering, can I work with this person? And I'll tell you what, that's a big deal, because I said emotional intelligence before. If you know how to treat people, if you're a jerk, you might be a great businessman, but I can tell you that's not going to help you when you're trying to sell your business. You're going to stay on probably 2 years. And, with an external sale, you might want to stay on longer for an internal sale just to make sure things are going well, because the cash cow needs to be able to pay you. But they're going to work more with people they think they can work with than not, for sure.
What is one clause or provision in a sale agreement that a business owner really needs to watch out for when they're selling a business? What's something that catches some people off guard? For example, like some sort of clawback provision or things like that.
I think that most, especially the bigger deals with public companies, are pretty straightforward and pretty fair. I think, Todd, the question should be, what stops owners from selling their business, right? The unknown, the change. And I went through it, right? When, like I talked about the work and process schedule. And if you predict the job is going to make X amount, let's say it's $1 million job, you're going to make $300,000. And that means you're going to spend $700,000. Okay. So you spent $350,000 at the date of closing. So you're halfway done based on your cost to date versus your estimated cost of completion. So you can take half your revenue, and half your profit. So you're going to make $300,000. You can accrue to that point $150,000. Now, what happens? Because it happens all the time, and I'm saying this because I don't want people to be, to be afraid of this. It happens all the time. Is that, what if it goes down? Like what? Oh, geez. Are they going to think I'm a liar, a crook, or whatever? No. And some of your jobs are probably going to go up. I'm saying that the clauses in the contract, and again, if you're represented well, you're not going to be surprised, right? You need to make sure you understand it, that your lawyer, your attorney, and your accountant understands it, and that your attorney has your best interest in mind, not the best interest of his firm. I've seen deals that cost. The last deal I did, the legal fees were $150,000. Okay. Now that was a $10 million deal. $20 million deal, it won't be much more because it's really the same due diligence. But on a $20 million deal, will an attorney try and push the envelope? Now, my attorney's great, and most of them are, but as an owner, be well represented. You're not an expert at contract law, right? You are maybe as a subcontractor, but not as a buy-sell agreement. So I get your representation. And don't be concerned with the bad things that might happen. They happen all the time. I've seen owners come and go. I've seen owners leave after 3 months when they had a 2-year deal. And you know what happened? They negotiated the exit. Wasn't good for anybody. But it was a big deal. He got 90% of his money. He didn't care. Now, I'm not saying, do it recklessly. Hell no. I'm saying do it with your eyes wide open and be well represented. Yeah.
So speaking of adjustments and things that people are afraid of, let's talk about the emotional part of selling your business. There's a big emotion. There's a lot of identity that's tied up in your business. Let's say somebody's been working on a business for 5 years, 10 years, 35, 40 years. And then they start to think about selling it. What do they need to be prepared for that doesn't show up on a balance sheet? It's not going to show up on any sort of due diligence. Let's talk about the emotional part of it.
Todd, that is a great question because that comes up every single time. And the legacy question, right? Look, why do people sell? There's many reasons to sell as there are owners. Everybody has a different reason. Could be health, could be want to retire. It could be they're just tired of it. Well, who knows? Whatever that is, the I think what happens is people are concerned about the wrong things. Example, they say, what's going to happen to my people? These people that I care about that help me get to where I want to go. Well, and I try to calm them down. I say, and it is a good question. I thought the same thing. And I say, first and foremost, understand that all of this is confidential until I say to the owner, like if you were selling a business, Todd, I say, Todd, everything is confidential until you want it to go public, which means all of the initial interactions and due diligence up to a point where you get a letter of intent and then they really need to dig in is totally confidential until you say, no, it's okay. Now, what people do mostly is they include like one person who knows and they trust them, because what you don't want is people thinking, hey, Todd's selling a business. What's going to happen to me? And that uncertainty. But you're doing it for the right way for the right reason. So now they say, what's going to happen to my people? And they all look at like the old movie Wall Street when these arbitrageurs come in and they fire everybody but the secretary and they shrink. That doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in the real world, at least especially when you're selling it internally, of course, but to an external buyer, it doesn't happen. But the concern is there. So what I say is, look, Todd, don't be surprised if some of your staff are happy. They should be happy for you, and some are going to see it as an opportunity because now they have a private owner with limited resources, and they understand that, and they really like you, Todd. But they may see this as an opportunity, especially people that want to move ahead, because now you're under a different umbrella. You got more resources. There may be opportunity for you to grow in a big company. Some people are going to be afraid, and man, nothing you can do about that. But I say that you have to make the best decision as an owner for you and your family, understanding that the people that are near and dear to you that work for you are going to be okay. Now, the other thing they think of, my clients are going to be upset. So I can only go back to what me and the last deal we did. I coached him on this, and he goes, what should I tell my clients? I said, when you sell, have an email or a phone list ready, and you call them and say, hey, I got good news. What's that? I sold my business to a big roll-up. It's unbelievable for me and my family, but guess what? What's that? I'm not going anywhere. That diffuses all concern that your clients are going to have. So now they're still dealing with you, right? But now they're dealing with the resources of a big company. So there's a lot of good things, but you have to take the time to coach people through this. And again, I said it earlier, and I don't want to sound like I'm a broken record, but be well represented, because you will learn so much and avoid so many unnecessary obstacles.
Good advice. So let's talk about, let's say that I wanted to grow a business and I wanted to make $1 million in 5 years. I wanted to sell a business for $1 million in 5 years. That was the target. What business would you recommend that I go acquire or start? What would your advice be for me?
So I know the commercial construction business, but even in my podcast, I talk about, look, most businesses are started by people who work for other companies and think that they can do either some or all of the offerings that their existing company has. And I'm not recommending you go out and start a business, but I did it, and I did it in the industry that I was in because I knew people in the business. I knew how to get business. I knew the business, right? So first and foremost, do something that you know and like. So if it's commercial construction, you want to sell it for $1 million, then you better have income, right, the year before you sell it of at least $250,000. And if you do that, just use the 5 multiple. You're going to be in that space somewhere. Now, I did an interview, Todd, with a building science guy, manufacturer called Dorkin, and he's the VP of, listen to this, the VP of operations and marketing in North America. Now that's kind of an odd thing. And I asked him about it. You'll hear about it in his interview. But I asked him the same question. I said, Marcus, if you could start a business today, right? Dorkin, your current employer, said, Marcus, we're going to give you money, start a business, come back to us in 5 years and tell us how it's going. I said, what would you do? And you know what he said? He described the business that he was in, the exterior wall business, and how you keep things properly heated and cooled and all those things, and even building the facade. So that's a great question, but he knows the business inside out. He's not a contractor, but I told him, I said, Marcus, if you want to start a business, just come and talk to me, because he would do kind of what I do. That was his choice. So again, do something you know about, and you can leverage what you know and who you know.
Got it. Good advice. So do you see any blue ocean opportunities out there in the construction industry right now? Let's say there's somebody who they don't have a lot of experience, but they're more entrepreneurial and they like the construction industry, but they don't have a lot of specific industry experience. Do you see any opportunities out there that if they came to you and said, I want to start a business, I want to go acquire a business, where should what segment, what geography would you point me in? Do you have any advice?
I do. And I would say, if you're going to buy a business, because we're going to start a business, it's a long game, right? If you're going to buy a business, you have the wherewithal to buy a business, I would say, or start a business, if you had cash flow and everything else, prefabrication, anything to do with off-site, as they call it today, off-site construction. Mm-hmm. That is the big trend in commercial construction and residential. Look, manpower is difficult. If you walk onto a job site now, you're going to see, and they're great workers, but Hispanic workers, some legal, many, I don't know, but it is like you don't get younger people, American-born citizens in the trades anymore. It doesn't happen. They want to get into computers and things like that. And the reason I say that is because there is a lack of manpower. It's certainly not growing. The industry is booming. Manpower in residential and commercial continues to be an issue. Now, one way to eliminate that is to keep more of your people. That is a whole nother episode, right? How to keep the people you have so you don't have the turnover. But prefabrication, I've been doing now I've been involved with prefabrication as a director since the 80s, but recently prefabrication in the mechanical industry, in the certainly the exterior wall industry with curtain wall and composite walls is the way of the future. So what happens? With technology, with building information modeling, you can build a lot of things off-site that 20 years ago, 15 years ago, you couldn't. Even 5 years ago, you might be concerned with. I had a meeting this morning with a big university in Towson University, and they have 4 existing buildings. We're taking off the exterior and recladding it. And the company that did the presentation today, their technology, their point cloud laser scanning, and it is going to enable my customer, which is CJ Coakley Prefab Solutions, to build everything in the shop without doing a single field measurement, because they have a laser scan up to like a 32nd of an inch. Now, that changes things, but it allows prefabrication to thrive. It takes the human error out of the equation. Even in the shop, we have what's called roll formers, and basically they get programmed to cut the studs exactly, pre-punch the holes exactly where they need to go. So when those studs, those steel studs come off the roll framer line, the assembly guys, I didn't say the manufacturer or anything like that. The assembly guys, because that's what they do. They don't fabricate. They put it on a table, connect the dots, and screw the holes into where they're supposed to go. It couldn't be any simpler than that. Now, quality control, the owners love it. It goes to the site. It's ready to go. You can pre-build them, have them ready. There's no rain, weather issues. So I know I'm getting into the details, but prefabrication, to answer your question, would be something, I talk to companies that do the buying, right? The big companies. I don't work for them. I represent the sellers. But I did a whole thing on prefabrication, why you should look at it. They haven't bit yet, but they will, because that's what's coming.
It's coming. Yeah, there's I did some research and looked at the amount of investor capital that's going into offsite construction, and it's growing exponentially.
Exponentially.
5 years ago, it was 200 million or something like that, a significant amount of money. But now it's in the billions of dollars per year, and it's just going hockey stick.
Now, if it wasn't for COVID, you'd see more, national conventions about prefab and everything. Like they're doing a lot virtually, but that continues to grow. And once a month, you can go somewhere and talk about offsite. So very, very good business to get into. And the good thing is, it's not so labor intense. You need people to put the stuff together, but there's a lot of opportunity. They talk about energy, right? Well, if we're gonna do less of this, we're gonna do more of this. So over here, you have more. There's opportunity, especially in technology, which is where the young people of this country want to be in construction. So prefab is good all the way around.
Interesting. Love it. Well, I want to be cognizant of your time. I'm sure we could talk for hours, but let's, this is probably as good of a place to land this thing as any. If people want to connect with you, they want to listen to your podcast, they want to hear about deep dives into your background, buying and selling a business, or just connect with you, let's talk about your podcast first. What's your podcast about? And then where can people find it?
So the podcast is called Commercial Construction, Elevate the Industry. And there's two parts to it. One is industry, me interviewing industry leaders. And the reason for that is, I look at my son, he works for me, and that's awesome. He's 29. I've met a lot of people in my career, but he is never going to get to meet most of these people. Now I can get them on a podcast. And just like today, maybe people will get to know me a little bit. I certainly gotten to know you. That is, in my mind, valuable to the listener. Aside of that, some of the things we talked about today, I'm going to cover in solo episodes, like starting a business and the things we, discuss, selling a business, how you build your business, relationship selling, all those kind of things that I've learned over the years. So if you're in the industry, I say this, if anybody from owner to intern, if you're in commercial construction, you can benefit from listening to the podcast. Now, you can find it on my website, adicorp.com. That's ADICORP. That's my last name spelled backwards, .com. And you can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Elevate Industry. You can find our YouTube channel, Commercial Construction, Elevate the Industry. Please look me up on LinkedIn. Find David Procida and connect, okay? And then follow me there. I really appreciate the opportunity for two things, to get to know you and to talk to your viewers and listeners. But I love to share what I know. So in a nutshell, that's why I'm doing the podcast. And as I said earlier before we even went live, that as long as I feel like I'm adding value and I'm having fun, I want to keep on doing it.
Yep. Well, this has definitely been valuable, and I've had a good time. So I've enjoyed it. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be on here, David, and let me know if there's anything I can do for you in the future.
Well, there will be, because I'll be interviewing you in the not too distant future. I love your podcast, and I thank you again for the opportunity.
My pleasure. All right. Be sure to go connect with David Procida. Go to his website, adicorp.com, ADICORP.com. Check out his podcast. Connect with him on LinkedIn. You can find all of those links in the show notes for this episode, but be sure to check that out. And more importantly, implement his advice. Hey, listen, if you can take a moment and leave a rating or a review, that would be great. It would mean a lot to me, and it also helps get the word out there about this podcast. If you have left a rating or review, thank you so much for doing that. It's always great to hear feedback. And if there's somebody that you know who would get some value out of this podcast, maybe they're thinking about selling a business or buying a business, send them a text and say, hey, you need to check out this episode. This guy could help you. As always, thank you so much for listening. My name is Todd DeWalt. You can reach me at constructionleadingedge.com. There are also lots of resources for you over at buildermasterclass.com, and I will see you next time.